of lectures is we're going to talk about how do we actually go about sorting data. And I want to start with the first main idea, which is the idea of a swap. So when I'm looking at data, I'm going to need to change the order of data because they're not going to be in the order that I want. So I want to talk about trading places here. So I've got x, which is a variable that contains a 3. And I've got y, which is a variable that contains a 4. And what I want to do is I want to trade places. And it seems like it should be pretty straightforward. It seems like I should just be able to say that I want x, let me get my pen here, that I want x to get the value of y, and then I want y to get the value of x. The problem is when I say that x gets the value of y, that means x is no longer going to contain this, x is going to contain the 4, and I've lost my 3. So now when I say that y now contains x, x is currently a 4, so if I make y contain a 4, I've essentially duplicated myself. So this isn't going to work, and if I try and do it the other way, if I want to say, let's let y get the value of x first, and we want x to get the value of y, you can see, okay, I want y to get whatever x has, so y is going to get the 3, and I've lost my 4. So now when I say x gets whatever the value of y is, I'm going to cross that out and get the value of y, which is currently a 3. And so I end up losing data when I try and just do this straight assignment, the idea that I'm just going to copy one variable over and then copy the second variable back. And it's this idea that I could lose the 4 or that I could lose this 3 through the process is something that I have to address. I have to address this as if I have extremely short-term memory. Like once I actually cross a number out, like when I cross this 4 out and replace it with a 3, I have no idea what this 4 is, so I really need to kind of store it somewhere. Store it somewhere in a temporary place. And so if I try to have a temporary placeholder, have a new variable called temp, and the first thing that I do is I say, okay, I want to take the value of y, and I want to copy it here. So in other words, I'm essentially saying temp is going to get y. Now the 4 is temporarily held here, so now I can say let's let y get whatever x's value is. So now I can actually cross out this number and put the 3 over here. And then when I say x gets whatever, not y has, because I want what the value y used to have. So I don't want y. I actually want temp. So in other words, now this 3 is going to be gone, replaced with temp. And now notice that my 3 and my 4 have indeed traded places. So I need this notion of a temporary placeholder in order to make this swap work out. So as I go through this, here's what it looks like in pseudocode. The first thing I have to do is I have to come up with this temporary variable, and it has to get one of these values. And whether it gets x first or whether it gets y first really doesn't matter, as long as I follow through immediately and replace that exact same variable with what it should end up with. So in other words, I'm replacing y if y was the thing I copied into temp. I'm replacing x if x was the thing that I copied into temp. And of course, the last step is this idea of temp needs to now be funneled into the variable I didn't store. So in other words, if I stored the contents of x, I need to make sure temp gets put into y. If I stored the variable y, then I need to make sure temp gets stored in x. So that's the idea of the swap. Now keep in mind, when we talked about the swap, we talked about it in the concept of a list. And so what I'm doing is I'm not swapping a particular index. What I'm doing instead is I'm swapping what's in the box. So if I have some array or some list that has a number like a 3 here and a 4 here, and of course this list could be any size, but if I want to replace what's in position x with what's in position y, I still am going to need to get some temporary memory location, but it needs to get the contents of this box. It needs to store the contents of the box, and then the contents of this box needs to be shuffled over here, and then whatever was in temp needs to be put into the box I didn't use in the original storage. And that's what's actually going to swap these out. And of course, the actual order doesn't matter. If I went back and tried to copy this 4 in first, and then copy the 3 over, and then copy the 4 into this location, I'm going to get the same result. So I need to keep this in mind when I'm going to be doing exchanges, because the reason we're doing this is because we want to talk about sorting. The idea that I'm going to have data that isn't in the right order, and I'm going to need to make sure that I swap things. So in this case, if I wanted to put these numbers in order, my first step would be to swap this number and this number, leaving the 5 alone. And so I'm going to need a temp to hold that variable. But now these two numbers aren't in the right order, and I'm going to need to swap them as well. And one of the things that we'll notice, one of the things that we'll see when we start talking about sorting, is that sorting is just a series of swaps. We're just going to be swapping over and over and over again. We're going to be swapping repeatedly. So what we're going to be talking about for the rest of this week is we're going to be talking about how do I swap repeatedly? How do I make sure that I do the right swaps at the right time so that the numbers that need to be exchanged do get exchanged? How do I make sure that happens, and how do I make sure it happens enough times? That's really the target for the rest of the lessons this week. So once again, this is Mr. Potter. Thank you for watching. Have a great day.